So here in the second summer turn of 1863 in the US Civil War, GMT Games, the Confederates won the initiative in this action phase, and they got two activations. They had to do some consolidation of forces over in the west, where they're facing a horrible looking charge by Grant in a maxed out army of the Tennessee, and their forces are split trying to defend Jackson and Vicksburg, and it all looks pretty untenable. So they went, what the hell, we'll throw Lee in here and have a go at taking Washington against the Army of the Potomac. So the Army of Northern Virginia, at full strength, 17 strength points, pretty much full strength, marched forward, attacked across it's not even navigable river, so they attacked just straight into the Army of the Potomac in this fortress in Washington. Army of the Potomac, 13 troops, plus 10 on the dice. Lee with a plus 7 with his bonuses and a card thrown in. And this is how the dice came out. An 18 for the Confederates and a 10 for the Union. And when you look that up on the chart over here, that's a 10 plus 10 for the Union, so they did 3 casualties to Lee, and Lee got an 18 plus 7, 25. He did 4, and has just taken Washington. So yeah, that's going to swing the victory points a little bit. Now, I had previously cocked up the victory points because I'd forgotten to be counting the 3 that West Virginia are worth. So they'd taken Charleston, Grafton and Wheeling, and that's another 3. So they weren't in quite such dire straits. They finished last turn on 23 victory points against and required 30, so they're 7 behind at close of play last turn, which isn't too bad. They were butting up against the 12 behind before I discovered those 3 points for them, and then they had a turn. They made some gains last turn over here in Corinth and Holly Springs and so on. So yeah, they are now having to weigh up what this is going to mean. Though I've only just made the dice roll, and I'm still really surprised. This was a bit of a Hail Mary, the long shot by Lee, and we rolled the dice and came up trumps. So that's his second action. So we're now going to go into two Union actions, to see what they're going to do in response. I reckon one of them is going to be Grant marching down here and chomping on the Army of the Mississippi, which, although it has an army marker, really isn't very strong. And then they're going to scratch around and see what they can do up around Washington. So at the end of turn 12 here, summer 2 in 1863, the victory point requirements for the Union are 33, and they have 28, so they're 5 behind. Unfortunately, the Confederates have 7, and that puts them 12 behind, and that is the end of the game. A Confederate victory with a smash and grab raid on Washington, which also then allowed Lee to grab an undefended Annapolis, and that was worth 2 victory points each at the end of the turn. The final throw of the dice for the Union was to activate the Army of the Potomac with a card to come through Baltimore and try and retake Annapolis so that they didn't lose these 2 victory points. But when Lee rolled an 11 on his interception and intercepted in Baltimore, that ended the possibility, and it was all she wrote. I didn't bother to play it out or roll it out because it didn't need it. There was going to be a battle in Baltimore, and that was going to be the end. In this final turn, Grant did all he could. He smashed down here, grabbed Vicksburg, then he attacked the Army of the Mississippi and decimated it at Jackson, and the Army of the Mississippi had to run away licking its wounds. Captured Jackson, but with very few initiatives this turn going. One, I think that we had 3 phases where there were 1s again, maybe a 2, a 1 and a 1 or something. Just didn't get the activations because he had to send Siegel back to garrison Vicksburg, because when the Army of the Mississippi ran away out of Jackson, it ran away down here and could have circled back and recaptured Vicksburg, which would have been annoying. So he had to re-garrison Vicksburg, and it just didn't happen for him. He did his best. That would have nearly opened up the Mississippi, but the Union weren't able to take New Orleans here from Kirby Smith. Hunter had 3 goes at taking Little Rock from Holmes and rolled 2 1s and a 2 or something, and just got beaten up every single time. Even with a card backing him up, it was horrible. And down here, Burnside did his best for the cause, driving A.P. Hill back out of whatever this place is called in Florida. Never heard of it. Ulusty, which is worth a point. So he pushed out of Jacksonville, took that. At least it allowed them some action in the east. But none of it was quite enough. They're 12 points behind. They needed 1 more point this turn to keep the game going. They couldn't find it anywhere. And so the Confederates have won. Wow. Yeah. That's a really... it's a beautiful game, really interesting game. Really finely honed game. You start with so little on the board, it feels like there's just yawning opportunities and horrible threats everywhere you look, especially for the Confederates, who have to try and find a balance between defending the coastline, where otherwise, if you don't start finding troops and digging them in to garrison Savannah and Charleston and all these places, then pretty swiftly the Union will sweep in with naval cards and just pick them off. So you've always got this tension between trying to garrison areas that don't look under threat but actually are, because the Union can just play a card and swing troops out of Baltimore or Washington or Annapolis or any of the ports up there. So there's a constant threat on these ports and forts. So you have to find the troops to garrison Charleston 3 points, and at the same time you're always feeling like you've not got enough troops to defend your front lines. You're outnumbered on every front that you care to look at, and yeah, that you always feel like you're under pressure. And on the Union side, you also always feel like you're under pressure. Partly because there's a ticking clock of victory points that you need turn after turn, and this is a really nice mechanic. I like this ticking clock of these victory points that slowly grind up and force you to keep a sustainable plan of attack, not just one-off smash and grabs. You have to find a way of sustaining the momentum of an attack, even when there's the threats of things darting in behind and recapturing stuff. And you also have this tension where you end up with dozens of stacks, and then you get 1 activation in the east-western Trans-Mississippi. And as you can see, the Union just in the west here have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, potentially 10 separate stacks here, and you're getting 1 activation. So you have to choose one thing to do something. Oh, they've got banks down here as well, and another one, 12. So it's really tough to find the balance between splitting forces so that you can generate threats into enough areas, and yet having the activations to actually do anything with all of them. So both sides have real issues to contend with, and I think probably like most balanced games, defending is probably in my experience, defending is usually just a little bit easier than attacking. I certainly found defending in this just a little bit more intuitive than trying to find the balance between, you know, splitting up stacks and having enough action points to use them, and the balance between you know, railing your troops out of the east into the west. As it turned out, I just got that slightly wrong, and Washington wasn't well enough defended, and it cost the Union the game there. But I mean, they had 13 troops in Washington. That's 3 dice. That's 3 dice with a +10. Most of the time, that holds Washington comfortably. It's just the Confederates went for it and got lucky. And yeah, what else have I got to say about this? Do I have any niggles with it? I still have slight I do have reservations about the way the actions end up distributed across the game. I think you're most likely to see lots of activity in the west and not much in the east, just because it looks so much more fruitful for the Union. And the other reason for that is that, as I've said, once you start putting resources into somewhere, you're kind of committed to spending actions there as well. You can't have a stack of 18 troops sat there under Grant and not be activating it every possible opportunity, which means that if you've got, you know, bad odds looking attacks over in the east and great odds looking attacks in the west, you're obviously going to take your great odds attacks first. And so, you know, there's much more opportunity here. All the decent Union leaders show up here, whereas mostly you get complete shite over in the east. And to be honest, the Trans-Mississippi, you've got, I think it's Halleck that sits there for, is it Halleck that sits there in St. Louis? No, it's not. I don't know. Can't remember who sits in Curtis. Anyway, whoever it is sits in St. Louis and is absolutely useless. 2 points to activate. And again, you're just not going to do that. You're not going to spend 2 points to activate a guy with 3 strength points out of St. Louis that is going to take him till 1863 to get down here. Anyway, that is something of a concern. But that said, I still think it's a fine game. Really interesting. Like I say, finely balanced, knife edge design. Loved playing it. Would have happily played a few more turns of this, although it did feel like it was reaching kind of crunch point, and I didn't necessarily feel the need to play 20 turns of it. You know, it ends where it ends. And a lucky Confederate strike ended the game, which, you know, feels good. Feels good to have reached a definite conclusion and not just sort of draggled out into a kind of stalemated or just, you know, just dragged along and overstayed its welcome when the end seemed, you know, inevitable. I didn't reach a point where it felt inevitable and I was just playing it, and that was really nice. It stayed tense and competitive right up until the moment where it ended, rather surprisingly. So there it is, US Civil War, GMT Games. Really, really nice. I'm almost intrigued if I could pick up a really cheap copy. I'm not paying 60 quid for a copy, but if I could pick up a £20 copy of the Victory Games original, I'd almost be tempted to pick it up and play through it and see what the differences are. But as it is, I've got so much good stuff on my shelf asking to be played. I've got Vietnam by Victory Games, I've got Korean War by Victory Games, I've got Carrier by Victory Games, I've just picked up the Jewels of Victory, the New England Simulations course and pocket game, and I've got SPQR from Great Battles of History that I want to look at. I've got Chandragupta from Great Battles of History I want to look at. There's just so much. There's just so much on my shelf. I mean, just those titles in themselves are months and months worth of play at the speed I go. So it's an interesting idea to get the Victory Games version, but I might be a little bit unrealistic there. Anyway, that was US Civil War by GMT Games. Hope you all enjoyed it.